Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. I am in Kentucky today. Kind of had a strange day yesterday. It took forever to get unloaded at my 90. In fact, I had a 0700 appointment, and I don't think I got out of there till like 2:30. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that, about my new strategy for dealing with lumpers. But anyway, I'm here in Kentucky. Sorry about the glare. I went by Fort Knox, Kentucky, which is south of Louisville, down by Elizabethtown. And a couple things about Fort Knox. One is, up until a few years ago, it used to be the home of Army armor, meaning tanks. And the Army now has the exclusive assignment or purview for tanks. The Marines recently stood down the 1st Marine Tank Battalion and disestablished it, actually. So the Marines are no longer going to have a tank capability. And that's part of just a whole rethinking by Marine Corps leadership of what the Marines' mission is. And the Marine Tank, the 1st Tank Battalion, had been around for, 50, 60, 70 years, something like that. Been a long time, but there are no more Marine tankers. It's all Army guys. But the Army actually moved the whole tank command down to Fort Benning. So really, at Fort Knox, there's really, it's like there's an Army Personnel Command, and also it's where all the Army ROTC cadets go for training over the summer. I will say, the other thing that Fort Knox is known for is like where the United States keeps its gold. But that's actually a separate facility that's adjacent to Fort Knox. It's the U.S. Bullion, depository. Yeah, depository. And so the other thing I was thinking about Fort Knox is its namesake. Its namesake is Henry Knox, and his name may not ring a bell, but he was a very, very important person during the Revolutionary War and even afterwards. He was the chief of artillery for the Continental Army, and he was a close associate of George Washington's. And he eventually became the first United States Secretary of War in the Washington administration. George Washington had lots and lots of confidence in Henry Knox. But the thing that one of the stories that stands out about Knox is, Knox was he was a bookseller in Boston. He's from Boston, so he wasn't like a friend of Washington's from Virginia at all. But right after the battles of Lexington and Concord, the British basically took control of Boston, and he and his wife, Lucy was her name, they get out of Boston. Well, Washington and the Colonials eventually besiege Boston, right? They surround it, and Knox had taken a role because he was familiar with engineering. He was also familiar with military history because he was well read, of fortifying their siege positions and putting artillery pieces in place. Well, Washington, when he finally got to Boston, met Knox. He was impressed with him, and people lobbied for him to be commissioned as an officer. One of the people who lobbied for him was John Adams, who of course was Washington's vice president later on. And one thing that had happened during this time is that the Green Mountain Boys and also forces under Benedict Arnold, who was a U.S. colonel, or a colonial colonel, I guess you'd say. They had seized the British garrisons at Ticonderoga and Crown Point, New York, and those were, garrisons with artillery pieces. So Knox undertakes to go to Ticonderoga and get all these artillery pieces to use them as siege guns around Boston. He persuades, Washington to let him do this, but he still wasn't even an officer technically he wasn't an officer in the military. But anyway, he goes out, he heads out to Ticonderoga, and he gets there on the 5th of December, and this is in 1776, or excuse me, 1775. 5th of December, 1775. And here's the thing to keep in mind. Ticonderoga is in Essex County, New York, which is north of Albany, and it borders Lake Champlain. And just to give you an idea of the kind of terrain that you'll find up there, the county is entirely in the Adirondack Park. Lake Placid, for example, where they held the Olympics twice, is in Essex County. So that's the kind of terrain. It's mountainous, hilly, and obviously it gets a little less steep as you get closer to Lake Champlain, which is a sizable body of water. But anyway, Knox gets these cannons. There's 60 tons worth of artillery. He gets sleds, because now it's winter and it's lots of snow, ice on the rivers. He gets these cannon, and he gets them on sleds with oxen. And he thought it would take him 2 weeks. Well, it ultimately takes him 6 weeks to get back to the siege lines around Boston. And I mean, it was 300 miles of, no pun intended, tough sledding. Okay, tough sledding. He had to go through New York, cross the Hudson, cross the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And I know a lot of people don't think the Berkshires are these giant mountains, and they're really not. But we're talking about oxen and sleds, and this is in an area that really wasn't that populated. I mean, if you look at Boston, was very populated. It was an urban area, as urban areas went back then. But the Berkshires are, even to this day, there's some pretty remote areas in that part of Massachusetts, in that part of New England. And, certainly north of Albany, remote area. So this was, and historians have called this move of these cannon by Knox the greatest logistical feat of the American Revolution. And to be sure, this task and this Herculean effort that they put forth turned out to be very, very useful and a tactical win. Because when they finally did get to Boston on about January 26, 1776, Washington, the troops under Washington, had by that time seized the Dorchester Heights, which has a commanding view of Boston Harbor. And with these new, larger guns, once they were in place, the British Navy basically vacated the place. So the British had to pull their troops out of Boston, because without the ships, there was no, they weren't going to be able to fight their way through the siege lines and successfully. And even if they did, they had no way to exploit that breakthrough. And so the British evacuated Boston, and their ships cleared out, because the Royal Navy, and I can't remember who was the head of the Admiralty then, but they weren't going to risk their ships being destroyed at Anchorage. So Henry Knox, namesake of Fort Knox, kind of a cool guy in U.S. history. So let me tell you about yesterday. So like I said, I get to my 90 at Giant Eagle in Bedford Heights, Ohio. And I knew it was going to be a wait, because just checking in, it took them forever to check me in. And then I saw that there was a sign in the window that said, "Here are the fees for Capstone Logistics." And anybody that's in trucking, as soon as they hear the name Capstone Logistics, they know it's not going to be a party, right? So I finally get to a door about, I want to say, around 10:30. So I'd already been there like 3+ hours. I get to a door, and then they start working on me, and I must have been one of the last appointments. But anyway, I take my paperwork in, they start. Well, then I told them when I went in, hey, I don't get the text messages to pay you guys, so you're gonna have to tell me how much it is. And they're like, okay, we'll call you as soon as we're done and we'll let you know. But they don't call me. So, I'm like, I was in my bunk, and finally I get up to go out to the porta-john, and I was just about to walk into the back in their office and go, hey, are you guys done? Because by now it's like 2 o'clock, and I see somebody like standing by my truck. So they're like, I go over there, and the guy's like, hey, we sent you the thing, have you paid for it? I'm like, no. I said, they said they were gonna call me. Well, man, we just want to get you out of here. I said, okay, how much is it? And he tells me, you can pay by credit card or cash. I'm like, I'll call and get an express code. Oh, how long will that take? I don't know. It'll take as long as it takes. And see, at this point, the lumpers want to leave, right? They think their day is done. But I've already been sitting there for hours and hours and hours. So I don't care at this point, right? Because now I'm completely out of hours. So I'm gonna have to PC out of there. So I've already essentially started my 10-hour break. So I'm in no hurry to go anywhere. So I'm just like, hey, you guys took forever. So I'll get you the code when I get you the code. And so it didn't take too long to get the code, and I wasn't purposely dragging my feet. But here's what I've learned, and I'm going to tell you about another kind of lumper scenario, right? Like these guys. So I was at a place in Massachusetts, right? And this was the load that had come from Tyson's, where I had a bunch of product that was rejected. Well, they're like, yeah, we've rejected some product, blah, 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 but you got to pay. And I'm like, okay, how much? Oh, I don't know yet. I'm like, okay, well, when are you going to know? It'll be a little bit. All right, I'm going back to my truck. Well, then when I was in my truck, this guy comes out, and he wants me, because I have a green light, he wants me to pull away from the dock so I can let another truck in there so they can do more work. But I'm like, no, I'm not going anywhere. When you give me the information that I'm supposed to have, and I can get my paperwork back and everything's wrapped up, then I'll pull away from a door. But until then, I'm waiting on you, right? I wait for you to unload me. You want me to leave, but I'm not going anywhere. I want what you're supposed to give me. I want to wrap this transaction up. And so that's kind of what I've been, like, I put the ball in their court. That and this isn't just Capstone, by the way, but that lumpers are almost never going to get you turned around in a hurry. It's just not going to happen. And when you go someplace and they tell you to park, and they got lumpers, you're gonna you know, you're going to have to file tax returns in that jurisdiction. You're going to be there for so long. I mean, you're going to be there so long that you probably have to switch your license over and your voter registration. You know, that's just how it is, right? And so I'm like, okay, once we pass the point of no return, which is to say, once my 14-hour clock runs out and I'm just like off duty or in the sleeper berth or whatever, I don't care when I leave. I'm not in a big hurry to leave, because all I'm going to do is PC to a truck stop, you know, or a place to park until my 10 hours is up. So what you know, my new policy with lumpers is I never really did get like upset about how long they take. I saw it when I first came into trucking, and that's just that, you know. But now I'm just using it to my advantage. So last night, so I did my 10, and then I had a pickup last night in Massillon, Ohio. It was supposed to be at 2100. So I show up about 8:45 p.m. I get there, they're like, yeah, go to this door. So I go to the door. I was backed into the door maybe 5 minutes, get a call from the facility. And the guy's like, hey, we only have part of your order. And he said your order like I ordered something. But anyway, I knew what he meant. But I said, okay, so what's the bad news? He said, so it's going to take several hours before we have what needs to go on your truck here, because they apparently have another facility. This is a place that makes snack food, by the way. And so I said, okay, well, I'll just go in the sleeper berth. And so he said, you can say yes or you can say no. If you say yes, we'll pay, detention will be paid. I'm like, okay. So I just started my 10 hours right there. And they didn't call me. So this is a little bit after, this is probably right around 9, maybe 9:05 or whatever. They didn't call me till 4:30 this morning. So then I just finished my, they didn't call me to say the trailer was loaded until 4:30 in the morning. So I just finished my 10. I was finished my 10 by 6. Then I did my departure call and everything. But yeah, it was like, it worked out fine, because I really was hoping, when I went there, I was hoping they would just get me loaded right away and I was going to immediately start my 10, even though I hadn't been on duty that long, because I wanted to kind of get on the day shift today. So I ended up doing 542 miles today. Although I kind of screwed up because I picked the Loves to stop at. This was my target stop. They don't have any showers. They got bathrooms, but no showers. But luckily, I bought some dude wipes or whatever, these dude shower on the goes. I bought these actually a while ago just for this kind of thing. Although I didn't think I would be camping at a Love's. I guess I still get free sodas, so I can't complain. So yeah, that's an update. This load's going to Russellville, Arkansas anytime tomorrow between midnight and 23:59. So I'm gonna get out of here pretty early in the morning and get over to Russellville, drop this off, get another load heading up towards hopefully up towards Springfield, Joplin, that area, because I have my first class I have to attend at 1300 on Monday, so that'll be exciting. Real quick, because I promised some stupid lawyer stories. So here's one. I'll give you one. I got plenty of them. But so a few years ago, I was in court in Hagerstown, Maryland. So Washington County, Maryland, Washington County District Court. And it was just a routine case. It was an afternoon docket, like 1 o'clock docket. And I think I only had one case. So, you know, I go there, and I can't remember. I think, I don't know if I was representing maybe Citibank, Bank of America. I can't remember. Anyway, and it's just a credit card case, right? Guy's defaulted on his credit card. Not a big deal. You know, usually you go, if the person wants to settle it, make some payments, you just, you know, set up a payment plan. And we had some court approved, you know, forms that were motions basically, where we would dismiss the case, and as long as they made the payments, and you know, we were usually very liberal about when they could start making the payments, you know, how much the payments had to be, how many months. So it was just to get some money out of the credit card holder, and then the case would just get dismissed, and as long as they made the payments, there wasn't going to be a judgment. So I go there, and I, you know, usually walk into court before the judge is on the bench, of course. And, you know, I see who the defendant's name is, what the defendant's name is, I should say. And so I just kind of say out loud, is Mr. So-and-so here, or so-and-so here, you know, John Smith or whatever. And this guy, you know, sticks his hand up, and I said, hey, can we just chat can I talk to you for a minute? And so he's on one side of the courtroom, and there are some benches there, you know. And so I just slide in the same row as him, and I got the file in my hand. And I start to talk to him, and I said, you know, I'm like, hey, you know, I represent whoever it was. I said, you know, we're here today. I mean, I'd like to settle this if you'd like to settle it. My client would like to settle it. If we can't settle it, then we're going to have a trial. And I'm going to try to get a judgment against you. And so then he kind of, you know, because his head was down, but then he kind of turns towards me and he starts to talk. And as soon as he does, I realize this dude has been drinking like a lot, and in the past few minutes, like this dude smells heavily of alcohol. And I'm like, I said, hey man, because here's the thing to keep in mind, right? In order to enter into a settlement agreement, somebody has to have contractual capacity, which means that they can't really be impaired. And so what I didn't want to do is enter into a settlement and then have him later say, oh, I didn't agree to that, I was drunk. You know, like kind of like from Talladega Nights, when, you know, Ricky Bobby's dad, he says, well, you said if you ain't first, you're last. He's like, I said that when I was high, you know? And so I didn't want that. So I said, look, man, I said, I'm not gonna settle this. If you've been, and he admitted he'd been drinking, right? And I said, I said, I can't settle this case if you've been drinking, you know, like if you're impaired, I can't do that. I said, we'll just have to talk to the judge. And I didn't know what the judge was going to do. I knew the judge, you know, I'd appeared in front of him many, many times. He was a very even-tempered guy, very kind of reserved, but you know, just he was a nice guy, and not a judge that I ever, you know, had any issues with. And so he calls the case. I go up there. The guy goes up there, and he said, you know, the judge turns to me. He's like, counsel, what's going on here? And I said, you know, Your Honor, I thought we were going to be able to settle this case, but after talking to Mr. So-and-so, it became clear to me that he is under the influence of alcohol, and notwithstanding that he wanted to enter into a settlement agreement, I didn't want to enter into one on behalf of my client if he lacks capacity. And the judge is like, sir, have you been drinking? And the guy's like, well, I had a couple this morning. And he's like, this morning, he goes, I could smell you from here. And this isn't a huge courtroom, but, you know, it's judge probably like 6 feet away, 8 feet away, I don't know how far. And he's like, did you drive here? And the guy's like, or he asked him where he came from, and he said Sharpsburg, which, by the way, is the town right by the Antietam battlefield. And he's like, you drove here, didn't you? And the guy was like, no, I got a ride. He's like, I don't believe you. And so the judge, he was just like, I'm entering a judgment for the plaintiff here. And he goes, I'm also getting the sheriff to make sure that you're not able to drive home. And, you know, he got the bailiff and everything. And it was just comical because Washington County's kind of out in this, it's Western Maryland, right? So it's like, it's a little more country than places like Montgomery County or, you know, Baltimore City or Prince George's County or whatever. And it was just cracking me up that this guy couldn't wait till after court to like start tying one on. But anyway, that's one of my lawyer stories. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'll be back soon. I'll be over in Arkansas sometime tomorrow, getting up towards Missouri after that. So be safe. If you're in the Gulf states, man, get away from the beach. Get away from the beach. Head inland, way inland. But anyway, be safe. Talk to you soon. Bye.